Thanks for tuning in to the Elwin channel, a place where we share all kinds of content ranging from life, health, history, to design. We do not know if, out on the moons of Saturn, you will meet with good or with evil, or only with ruins 1,000 times older than Troy. Arthur Charles Clarke, English sci-fi writer. Interesting fact number 1. Did you know that it's possible to have more than one moon? Well, that is certainly the case for Saturn, and it has claimed up to 145 moons, as opposed to Earth's one and only moon. Interesting fact number 2. One of the most prominent or noteworthy moons, known as Enceladus, is an amazing entity all its own. It displays activities known as ice volcanism, in which there are hundreds of geysers, or fountain-type terrains that spit out water coming from ocean-like elements that are hiding inside the planet of Saturn. Fact number 3. The Latin word Saturni dies means the day of Saturn, from which we get the name for Saturday in English. In last week's video, we touched on the fascinating topic of Jupiter for our planetary series. Today, we have yet another amazingly unique planet in the solar system, and that is Saturn. Some deem it to be the most unique due to the beautiful and visually aesthetic rings, but we'll get to that in just a bit. As you may know, Saturn is the 6th planet that is away from the Sun, as well as the second biggest one, following right after Jupiter. Although not always easy, some planets that are in relatively close proximity to us here on Earth are visible with the naked eye. Well, within reason, of course, and Saturn is the farthest and last one of the planets that we can actually see without the help of technological tools such as the telescope. When looking at Saturn, think of it as a gigantic ball of gas, or better yet, a massive helium-filled balloon. Why, you ask? Because unlike terrestrial planets like Earth and Mars, Saturn is more like Jupiter in that it's not touchable with physical things and is completely composed of helium and hydrogen. And since it's one place in our solar system that is much less dense than water itself, it would, in essence, float on top of water if we were physically able to do so. Kind of crazy to visualize, isn't it? This enigma of a planet is so large that it measures up to approximately 72,300 miles in diameter, whereas, as mentioned in previous videos, Earth's diameter is 7,900 miles. In simple terms, Earth would fit in Saturn approximately 764 times simultaneously. And when it comes to the rotation speed on its own axis, it takes only 10.5 hours from start to finish. The laws of physics come into play here in that the strong centrifugal force that the rotation speed creates also causes the equator of Saturn to protrude significantly as it flattens or pancakes up at the North Pole and down at the South Pole, sort of like a pizza dough being spun, you could say. For hundreds of years, we have known that several of the planets, such as Uranus, Neptune, Jupiter, and Saturn, have small rings around them, and some of them are barely visible compared to Saturn. But even then, Saturn has such prominent rings, and they are vastly numerous. And this is because scientists believe they're composed of leftover particles of elements like asteroid debris and pieces, ranging all the way from tiny grain-sized particles to building-sized entities. As was common practice in the Greco-Roman world, the ancient Romans assimilated the Greek deity, originally known as Cronus, into their own version known as Saturnus in Latin. Both iterations of their deities were labeled as the god of time, freedom, bounty, sowing, seeds, and agriculture. Strangely enough, Saturn has always been known as the most complex individual among the Roman deities, and with good reason. There have been different opinions and accounts as to what he represented most strongly, but one thing that historians have agreed on is that the Romans held fast to the belief that he devoured his own children out of fear that they would take over his rulership. And thus, when his son Zeus overthrew him with the help of his own mother, Saturn is said to have been banished and exiled to Latium, or ancient Italy. After such a poignant event, he ruled those people and taught them how to observe beautiful and peaceful arts, as well as the methods for obtaining abundant agriculture. And thus, the ancient Romans long celebrated their favorite holiday known as Saturnalia, which allowed them to liberate themselves socially and physically, and even allowing slaves to have a day of their own freedom. Many people believe that Saturn signifies our social responsibility and understanding the consequences of our own actions, which would make sense when we look at the journey that the Roman deity had to experience. And that wraps up our 5th installment in the planetary series. As always, thank you for tuning in to the Elwin channel.